Americans are actually not very polarized on policy issues. You get huge agreement in the middle on really hot button topics like immigration or abortion, gun control, but we're very affectively polarized. That means that we hate each other, and we don't know that we have a lot of similarities in our policy beliefs.
Well, where is that coming from, though? I've heard this argument before that, when we hear about these big culture war issues and it gets amplified and we become so obsessed with it. And I've heard this argument that those opinions represent probably a small fraction of our society, yet they do seem to dominate our headlines, our media, and certainly our social media.
That's exactly right. What we have is a small chattering class, a lot of media, and some political partisans who are very incentivized to push us to become more and more polarized. And those entities sell papers, get eyeballs, get votes by polarizing people more and by telling us that we're more polarized than we are. And so there's real incentive structures working to make Americans think that they disagree more than they do. What that means is that they tend to vote for more extreme candidates than they otherwise would, and that gives the cycle a self-fulfilling quality.
So pull apart those political incentive structures, and ultimately whether a different voting system changes that, or is this something that we're seeing no matter how people vote around the world?
Well, what we're seeing actually is that, for instance, in Europe, far-right parties gained in a number of countries in the recent EU elections, but they didn't take over a whole political party. They gained a small vote share that would give them a few more parliamentarians in the EU Parliament, and people had a wide variety of options to pick from if they still wanted a more typical center-right or center-left and et cetera voting. So that ability to pick from different flavors of politician rather than just two means that although people have preferences that are moving, the whole party isn't flipping into a real polarized place. America, by having two major parties and also by having a winner-take-all system, that means you get one extra vote more than your opponent, you get the whole shebang, whether that's a state or a city or a district. Those two structures are found to be very polarizing structures and also lead to more political violence.
So what becomes the solution, if at all, particularly here in the U.S. here? Is there anything that could sort of arrest this progress and even more importantly, I guess, reverse it?
Absolutely. So there's been some great research out of Stanford. They looked at 30,000 Americans. They did all sorts of interventions to see if there were ways to decrease polarization. And a number of them proved really useful. One was just correcting misperceptions, just telling people, hey, guess what? The median Republican and the median Democratic voter actually share a lot of the same policy views. You're being politicized by other forces. Things like that make a big difference. Showing people that Democrats and Republicans can get along to do other things, to build a community garden or to act in interests that they both share, that helps a lot. Helping Americans realize just how bad it can get, what it looks like when other countries fall into dictatorship or political violence, that can help a lot. And then while Stanford didn't test it, we know from these cross-country comparisons that different voting systems help a lot. When Northern Ireland got out of its troubles, its real extreme violence, they switched to a proportional representation system because they knew that it would depolarize their country. And in America, there's a number of groups, usually led by citizens and blocked by professional party politicians, but attempted by citizens to give people just more options to vote for. So Alaska's passed voting reform, Maine's passed voting reform, and it's in the works in Nevada and other places.
Well, that gets to the point of sort of who ends up sort of helping to lead this process. Is it going to be sort of a singular figure, maybe at that federal level, or is this going to have to be much more organic from the individual communities, cities, and states?
So people who win in the current process are unlikely to want to change that process. That's just the incumbent reality. And so it tends to come from citizens, although some members of government, of course, are more open to it than others. And in cities and states that have citizen referenda, where people can put things on the ballot themselves, you're seeing a real desire to move towards systems in which people can vote for, say, a socially conservative Republican over a fiscally conservative Republican, or vice versa, or a Democrat who supports the working class and is more class-based versus a Democrat who's more socially and racially aware. And so you're starting to see a desire for, can we really express our actual feelings? And by the way, can we be enfranchised if we're part of the minority in our state that's still pretty large? California, for instance, is a Democratic state, has a huge Republican Party, numbers-wise, that's disenfranchised. And you see the same thing in major Republican states that have large Democratic groups. And those people don't end up getting to share what they really feel and don't end up feeling represented when you get the ideology of extremes taking over the candidates, so they don't represent the whole of the state. So you see a lot of citizen desire for this change.
What about corporate desire? How are companies weighing in or trying not to at this moment?
Trying not to might be the main thing that they're trying to do. Companies really would rather do business and stay out of politics. Polarization is not good for business. It makes it hard for them to keep their staff happy. They get demands from both sides, and whoever they please, they know they'll displease the other side.